Hello, welcome to this series on culture and worldview. These 3 or 4 lectures are just going to be a brief overview of culture and worldview. So let's start here. Cross-cultural communication has 3 major components. One, the sender, that's the missionary. Secondly, the message, that's our gospel message we want to share with people. And thirdly, the receiver, the receptors, the people to whom we've gone to share the gospel. Many years ago, the head of the International Bible Society, Eugene Nida, he said this, and I think it's very key. He said the greatest obstacle for non-Christians becoming Christians, the greatest obstacle for non-Christians becoming Christians is not necessarily the message, because it's a warm message. Jesus loves you. Often it's the messenger who's the obstacle, and I think particularly in cross-cultural situations. So I like to say a missionary is a special person. I think actually very few people are really suited to being a cross-cultural missionary. Doing a special job. It's not just enthusiasm. We need skills, and that's why we, for instance, for YWAM, we come on the SOFM cross-cultural course to acquire those skills. And in a special place, not our familiar home environment, but in a foreign land. And so, what do we need? We need special gifts and skills. We'll think about that as we go through. Special qualities. We'll think about that with the video, What is Success? And then special training. And let's think about this now. Supposing you wanted to become a Wycliffe Bible translator. What special training would you require to be an effective Bible translator? Well, obviously, there's translation skills, language learning skills. Oh, you need a course on Bible and theology. And there's something else. Obviously, linguistics and phonetics is key. So you need all these, linguistics and phonetics, Bible training, cross-cultural skills, how to learn other language, and how to translate the Bible. But the key question is, when you have acquired these different skills, will you definitely succeed as a Wycliffe Bible translator? And of course the answer is no. Because the missionary is different from, say, a car mechanic. The car mechanic, all he needs is skills to how to repair, how to service vehicles. But the missionary has an added need, and that is skills in interpersonal relationships. Because the key to success as a missionary, and we'll keep coming back to this, the key to success as a missionary is whether or not you're accepted by the local people. We're accepted by the local people. You see, our goal is to bring change. Originally, there weren't Christians, but because we've gone, there now are Christians. Originally, there wasn't a church, and because we went there, there now is a church. And so we need to ask, how can we bring change? And the key is to become accepted. That's the first step, to become accepted by the local people. Originally, you were an outsider. Now you're an insider. And so the step one to bringing change in that place is that you and I must change. And we're going to think about that during these next couple of lectures. But let's just quickly have an overview, look at an overview of where we're going to go. Firstly, we seek to understand their culture and learn their language. And when we do that, they appreciate our effort. The next step, using the Apostle Paul's illustration, we take off what they don't like about us, our customs and ways and culture, and put on what they do like. So, for instance, if you and I, we've gone to Japan, we take our shoes off at the front door before going in. different from the UK, where people seem quite content to walk indoors with wet and muddy feet. When we take off what they don't like and put on what they do like, they therefore begin to feel comfortable with us. And this is so key. They feel comfortable with us and are hence more likely to accept us. And because they've accepted us, they allow us to sit where they sit. And as we sit together with them, they become more open to the message. Why? Because now we're friends, and that's key. Having been enabled to sit where they sit, the second major stage is to discover their worldview. And as we discover their worldview, we think through how we can more readily present our message so that they more easily understand. This is an overview of what we're going to cover, especially in the next 2 or 3 lectures. So, what is an effective missionary? I think there's 4 key areas. 1, they're living contentedly. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're living happily there. My wife and I, we were missionaries in Taiwan for 40 years. And I'll tell you honestly, to this very day, I can't stand the smell of stinky tofu or durian. But I will tell you, we lived there contentedly because we knew we'd discovered the place where God was pleased to use us to bring blessing to the church in Taiwan. So the first is living contentedly. Second, relating appropriately to the local people, as I've already said, so that they feel comfortable with us and are more likely to become our friends. But we haven't gone there just to live contentedly and relate appropriately. We've gone to do something. And so sharing effectively the gospel message so that they more easily, more readily understand. That's a huge challenge. And finally, growing spiritually. So that even before we are able to verbally share the gospel message, hopefully they see Jesus Christ in you and me. So these 4 parts of the effective missionary: living contentedly, relating appropriately, sharing effectively, and growing spiritually. So let's look at these one by one. Firstly, living contentedly. I'm going to tell you a story. Are you ready? Billy and Bobby and Baby lived in Squaresville, where Billy and Bobby had grown up. In Squaresville, they speak Squarish, and their culture, squareness, was seen, was understood, was interpreted through the squaring glasses that everyone in Squaresville wore. You see, in Squaresville, the houses were square and had a square fence round them. The tables were square, and they ate off square plates. And Billy was successful as pastor of Squaresville's Foursquare Gospel Church. But one day, Billy and Bobby heard the call of God to take the gospel to people who lived in Roundsville, a people who spoke Roundish, and their culture, roundness, was seen, was understood, was interpreted through the round rim glasses that everyone in Roundsville wore. You see, in Roundsville, the houses were round and had a round fence round them. The tables were round, and they ate off round plates. But sad to say, when Billy and Bobby moved to Roundsville, they continued to wear the squaring glasses that they had always worn, that they felt so comfortable wearing. In fact, they didn't really notice they were wearing it, and hence were never successful at bringing the gospel to the people of Roundsville. Now, this story tells us 2 key things. Firstly, obviously, our need to see through the glasses of the people we've gone to understand their culture, to understand their worldview. And that's why we spend time uh, digging out the culture, local culture, to understand it more deeply. But also, it tells us that you and I, we wear glasses that give us a unique worldview, a value system. But the problem is, and that's what we're going to think about in the second lecture, some of those aspects are buried deep within us, in our subconscious. And we need to think, how can we raise this up so that we can understand more fully, better, what our worldview and values are? Okay? So we seek to understand their culture and their language. How can we do this? I think talking with experienced missionaries who are living there, or maybe online through people who've lived there in the past. I think also talk with local people, knowledgeable local people who love to share their culture with us. That's useful. And then, of course, going online or reading books. These are all going to help us understand the culture. Here's something that I got from Wycliffe, as Carol Orwig. I found this really helpful. Learning the culture, 6 different aspects. Firstly, who's who? Who's who? This is to do with social status and how we relate. I remember as new missionaries, a Taiwanese family kindly invited us to stay in their home for a weekend. And I observed that the children didn't call each other by their given name. They called them by their sort of kinship titles. So one would say to the other, older brother, come and help me. Or younger sister, don't do that. And so from an early age, they were understanding their position, both in the family, as the members relate to each other, and then later on in society. Who's who? Secondly, what's what? How are objects classified and grouped? I found with my Chinese friends, fruits, some they called heaty, they sort of heat you up, others were cooling. And so cherries and lychees were more heaty, and pineapples and watermelons were more cooling. So they, through their glasses, that's how they categorized different fruits. What's what? Thirdly, and this is important, how are things done? What's the correct way to do things regarding social functions, regarding etiquette? In the culture you're going to, how does boy meet girl? Is it that they go online or they find their own girlfriend or boyfriend? Or do their parents arrange the marriage for them? Also applying for a job. Do you go online, or do they go online and look for a job? Or do they call their uncle who runs a business in the next town and says, Uncle, can you give me a job? How are things done? Social functions and etiquette. Then this is also key. How does a good person behave? This is to do with morals and values. In the culture you're going to, what is the definition of a good husband or a good wife? You see, as Christians, we have a concept of a good husband, a good wife, and we get these values from the Bible and from our culture. But we need, when we go there, to see how they see what a good husband and a good wife are. Or take politicians. Here in the UK, we expect our politicians not just to be effective, but also to maintain high moral values. And sad to say, we're often let down in that respect. Then, fifthly, what's true? And what's lucky in this culture and what's unlucky? Um, in my culture, Friday the 13th is unlucky. When I went and lived in Chinese country, I found that the number 4 was unlucky. What's lucky in Chinese culture? Well, there's a cycle of 12 years, each year having the name of an animal. And when you come round to the year of the dragon, that's supposed to be lucky. And so parents like to have a child in the year of the dragon. Now, that's nice for the parents, but it's a real headache for the Ministry of Education when eventually all these children start going to school and they have to find places for them. What's true to do with beliefs? And finally, what's real to do with worldview? Relating to the dear departed. When my grandparents died, it was sort of dead and gone. But when I went to Taiwan, I found you have to look after the dear departed in the other world, wherever that is. And so you need to supply them with food and money, so burn paper money, so they've got something to live on. What's real? So these 6 are very key. And as we spend time learning them, they appreciate our effort and our attitude and are often delighted to teach us. I think this is very key. As new missionaries, we need to be going around and saying to local people, please teach me. Please teach me. Because they're often delighted to teach us. And it also demonstrates a beautiful, humble personality, which is always appreciated. Then, as we move on, we need to understand their customs and culture so that we take off what they don't like about me and my ways and put on what they do like. I think of a Chinese culture where titles are important. And so I don't go around in Taiwan saying, just call me Martin. No, they wouldn't feel comfortable. They'll call me Teacher Martin. And I must allow them to do that. And so as we take off what they don't like, take off what they don't like about us and put on what they do like, the result, and I've already said this is key, they feel comfortable with us. When I was a new missionary, I thought, I'm going to learn the Chinese culture so that I feel comfortable in Taiwan relating to Taiwanese people. But I think it took me 10, if not 20 years to realize that's only half the story. All right, I'm learning the Chinese culture so that I feel comfortable with them. But also, as I put out effort to learn the Chinese culture and adapt to it, the key is that they will feel comfortable with me. And that is key. And so that's living. Now let's move on to relating. And here is something that Don Larson, a wonderful missionary, talked about, and I think it's so key. The unalterable law: doorstep, sitting room, kitchen. I love to say your success and my success as a missionary is related to these 3 words: doorstep, sitting room, kitchen. Now, what was Don Larson talking about? You think about it. When someone comes and knocks on the door, when you open the door and see it's a stranger, do you invite them in? No. You keep them on the doorstep. And what do you talk to them about? Well, if it's British, you talk about the weather. But if it's a friend who comes and knocks on the door, you don't keep them on the doorstep, do you? You invite them into the sitting room. And having first talked about the weather, you talk about more meaningful things. But it's only family members and close friends who are invited into the kitchen. Bigger but, it is only in the kitchen where these people are going to discuss significant issues to do with their life, to do with change. And so your goal and mine is to get into the kitchens. This is a picture, the kitchens of their heart, to get into as many kitchens of the local people as possible. Now, how do I get into people's kitchens? Let's move on. I've already said, I need to become accepted. And so that's why I need to demonstrate humbly that I am teachable and that also I enjoy living in this country. I think it's very important to point out things to local people that you really enjoy. Don't talk about the things you don't enjoy, but point out the things you really enjoy. And they're more likely to accept you. And as they accept you, so they're going to invite you into their kitchen and, God willing, will become more open to the message. So I say again, they're only likely to invite you into their kitchen if we're now friends, if they feel comfortable with you. And this can be the problem often for Western missionaries. We go somewhere, we've gone there to do something, that's right, but we're so ministry focused that we forget the first step is to open people's hearts before we start to open people's minds. And so this is key. We need to become accepted, to be welcomed, become friends, sit in the kitchen, sit where they sit before we can begin ministry. But then, if we're accepted, if we're in their kitchens with them, we can get on to sharing and to discover their worldview. Now, I think what's key is we have to ask what moves people, what drives them, what do they fear? These key questions. Some missionaries are so busy translating their gospel presentation into local language that they fail to answer these three key questions. What moves people? What drives people? What do they fear? We in Taiwan used a private language school, and in Taiwan, September the 28th is Confucius's birthday, as I'm sure you know, and it's a public holiday. And so a group of us language students, we decided that we would write a card and bake a cake and take it to the head teacher. Well, we didn't tell her we were coming, but fortunately, when we knocked on the door, she opened the door, she was at home, and she invited us into the sitting room. So after a few minutes, we presented the card, we presented the cake, and she burst into tears. And I thought, what's there to get emotional about? It's only a few cherries and a few raisins. But she was obviously moved by this expression of love and appreciation. And I thought, I'd better tell the wife to keep baking more cakes if it's going to have this wonderful effect. Have this wonderful effect. So as we discover their worldview, we can then think through how can we present the message clearly so that they understand readily. And we're going to think about this in the fourth lecture. But firstly, just a couple of slides to end with. Here, I think, are some good, helpful books on what it is learning the culture and worldview in a cross-cultural situation. And then also, if you want to download these PowerPoints, handouts, videos, if you go to this website, YWAM Language and Culture Learning, you'll find them all there. Okay, I hope you found this helpful, and then we'll get on to the second lecture in a few minutes.